No,
Spectrum
I'm
discussion
with you.
post with guest
You want
Spectre
to talk
13.
about, you want to sacrifice the ability to dock on a planet. Okay, so you've got to deal with the atmospheric interference of the planet. So you've got to turn your shields off because you don't want to create like some kind of funky ion storm or whatever you want of the planet. So you're turning off your shields. That puts you at a huge level of vulnerability. You don't have your primary defenses up and running. You have to turn off your sensors because you only have line of sight to work with. You don't have lidar and gravimetric and all kinds of other fancy sci-fi
All these systems that are calibrated for space
exactly.
operations.
So you have to deal with what you have around your local area.
Or
So you're
utilize org mates that have ships that are designed to
well.
operate in
So now
planetary
hang on.
areas.
If you have an org mate who's able to relay, like let's say you've got a carrier sitting in orbit, the carrier sitting in orbit is able to say, "Hey, yo, we've got some huge gravimetric ping coming out at X distance at X range. This might be another capital ship. Look alive, get your guns up," and they're able to relay their sensors down to you.
I'd say probably like a Polaris. Let's just pick
Yeah.
something in
Okay.
Star Citizen
So
terms.
let's say you
Polaris with
have a
like a capital
Polaris.
class radar shield in there.
You have an Idris in orbit. You've got a Polaris who's coming in to try to kill you.
That's kind of where I see it though. Like, so the Javelin could use a considerable amount of fuel. It would have to turn off a lot of its defensive capabilities. I agree with you on that. You have a good point about sensor clouding as well. Its systems are not meant for this. But if it has all of those if sorted and it's willing to accept those or have org mates that are supporting it, like a support fleet, while it's moving in and out of this gas cloud, of the upper gas cloud, I don't see why it would break the game for them to be able to go in and
Exactly.
out.
I'm with
And
you 100% on that. You've got a
yeah,
ship that's turning off its long range sensors, its primary defenses. Because let's be honest, if you have to fire a missile to intercept an enemy, that's a secondary defense. Your primary defense is your localized shielding. If you have to turn that off to stop from creating some gigantic interference in the planetary atmosphere, you've got to turn your shields off. You've got to turn your. You can maybe keep your primary screening up, like your close range
PDS
screening
systems.
weapon. Yeah, exactly. You can keep that online. That's not going to break anything. But your long range detection, so you can say, "Yo, hey, I've got a Polaris that just jumped in. I've got a fleet of retaliators that just jumped in." You can say, "Okay, I can't see that stuff because I've got atmospheric interference between me and them." That makes sense. But you turn off your long range detection, you turn off your localized defenses, and you're basically saying, okay, I have armor and close range screening weapons that are still I can still use, and that's viable. I mean, that's a good sacrifice. I mean, you can say, okay, I've turned off my primary and secondary defenses to allow me to dock on this high altitude orbital platform.
Yeah, like Augusta
But
Dunlow or the Providence
exactly.
platform, whichever one they choose. Put a capital class docking collar there, and
Exactly.
some type of support mechanism. The UE Navy started Orison because of its significantly lower gravity and its breathable atmo up in high atmosphere. So what's interesting about that as well is Javelin owners would be able to operate, like do work on their ships, be able to walk around the outside of them and check them out and stuff and work on them, just like the UAE Navy used to build capital ships there. They've been very coy about what ships are built there. I think there might have been some type of story that included Idris's being built there or something like that. I think, and then the Krakens are being worked on now. They've been very coy about not using the word javelin, but I would love to see the javelin be able to dock in places like Orison and give gas planets with planetary landing locations that are this significant a key resource for orgs that
Well,
have
now,
larger ships.
so planetary landing and planetary docking would be two different things. If you wanted to have like a stratospheric level docking perimeter, like maybe like a space elevator or something that went up from the ground to low Earth orbit or low Orison orbit, that would be one thing. But if you wanted to have the ability for this capital class ship to land on the planet, that would be a negative.
No, no, it's a gas cloud. There's no core. The core is just high
No,
pressure crushing.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. But like, I feel like a lot of the community, and I don't want to pick, I don't want to poke at anybody in particular because I don't quite frankly know anybody in particular. I don't want to say like,
It's one of the reasons I tapped you for this.
yeah, no,
You don't come with
I'm
the
with the
biases.
I'm with the conceptual in this. You have a concept like this is your Star Citizen level type. What do you want that ship to be
Well,
able to do?
for players, yeah. I mean, there's
Exactly.
much
And
bigger ships, but
no, I'm
such as
with you.
technical destroyer class
You don't want this ship to be able to dock in your standard star base, to jump through your standard stargate.
outpost, right?
You want to put
They live
some
in space.
limitations on
They
it.
live in
Exactly.
space. They go to bigger outposts. They are meant to
But
be spacefaring ships. However, having
at
them go to a gas giant with the large, they call them planetary landing locations, even though technically it's floating in the high atmo.
no,
So it'd be docking next to
I'm
it.
with you on that. I'm tracking. So if you wanted to have some way to have this ship, let's just use Eve terms here since it's something we're all kind of familiar with. If you wanted to have some way to have this ship tether to a an orbital starbase or a low orbital starbase, you would want to have it turn off some of its defenses. It shuts off its shield. It shuts off its long range sensors. It basically becomes a freighter. And if you want to allow it to do this stuff, by all means you can. But at the same time, you're saying, hey, I'm turning this massive $5,000, whatever a Titan costs, of Eve value into a baby that my org is going to protect, that my org is
Exactly.
going to con- devote everything they have to try and protect. Then I'm with you 100%. Let this thing do whatever it wants. If it wants to land on the planet, but it has to turn off all defensive weaponry, all shields, all sensors, that's a good idea.
It
Make
reminds me a
this thing.
lot. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It reminds me a lot of the Crib of Veldnot, if we're talking about Eve terms.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a
When
great idea.
he fit it with like Tech One miners, I think it was mining lasers, and its highs on a dreadnought that was stuck in
Mm,
that was basically he could have got it out of high sec anytime he wanted, but he it was more of an oddity, and
exactly.
he was forbidden by CCP, the makers of Eve, to put weapon systems on there. They explicitly told him if you do that, it'll be thrown out of high sec. So
Exactly.
he just went and mined tritium
He
and
turns it
bots.
into kind of a status symbol. And so I don't want to go too preachy into your recording if you're doing a recording, but like in my lore for the story that I'm writing, if a ship wants to dock or a ship wants to enter atmosphere, it has to shut off its shields, which is its primary defensive mechanism. Like a ship that's getting attacked, its first thing is to harmonize its shields. It says, "Hey, we've got missiles inbound. Let's harmonize our shields to kinetic damage. Like, oh, they're whatever type of missiles. We set our shields to that type of resistance. So their primary defensive is they turn their resistance to that thing. They've got to shut off their shields. Well, we have light screening weapons, which basically equates to like short range flak,
Mhm.
and that's kind of the only thing they can keep online when they're entering the atmosphere because they can keep the gun turrets online. Like the gun turrets can operate as they're entering the atmosphere. That's not going to break anything. But their long range sensors, like their ability to detect anything outside of a few hundred meters, is gone because as they're entering the atmosphere is getting thicker. They've got that thermal. I don't want to say blanket, but like that thermal layer of
Right
radiation.
on planets that have such thick,
Well,
yeah.
thinking about like just let's just say Earth for example, because that's kind of like everything everybody's got their hand around is Earth. So you've got that thermal blanket as you're entering the atmosphere of Earth. You've got this layer that you can't really see out of, and that's kind of their limits. They have this regardless of like their power inside of atmosphere. They've got this like their limit of ability of the individual gun to track a missile coming in or track a ballistic coming in through their radiation or whatever. And that's their limit. They can't see like beyond the individual gun, or at most like the ability of the sensors to say, hey, yo, we've got a missile at 500 meters coming in, look alive on this sector. And they're really limited to that kind of thing.
Right, but
But
in Star Citizen, the ships do have that ability. Aside from ships that are not designed to be in
right,
planetary orbit,
and to be fair,
in Atmo.
I'm not up on Star Citizen's lore, but you have the ability of another ship in orbit to relay like, hey, you've got a javelin out here that just fired a missile coming in at this trajectory. Maybe throw some flak down in that position to protect you. But like, what can the individual gun turret, what can the command and control center see from that position that it can say to the gun turret, "Hey, we've got a missile coming in this trajectory. Throw some flak down in their face."
Well, the simplest thing they could do is just disable its size 12 torps when it's in atmosphere,
Oh,
and
and
just say,
that's a
okay,
given. I mean, that's kind of a given. Like, okay, your main guns. It Think about it like in terms of Eve guns. In Eve, the guns are the size of buildings. Like, if you wanted to try to extend a siege platform in Atmo, you're losing
it's a good point.
accuracy, you're losing tracking, you're losing everything. I mean, you're basically extending a building from the size of your ship. The gun itself is going to take damage.
Probably
Like,
the largest guns and the torp platform will probably be a fair compromise.
well,
Allow it to keep its PDSs and its smaller turrets,
so
anti
now
fighter turrets.
that the real question arises from, are the torps inboard into the ship? Like, are these coming
Yeah,
from the
there's
actual hull of the
rooms.
ship?
There's rooms
Or is
with
there like a turret that's based like the
no,
Caldari missile turrets that are
no.
launching the
There,
torpedoes?
it's physically two rooms at the front of the structure with like circles pointed out the wall. Basically, it jettisons the torps. There's
So
like tubes, like a
those
submarine.
would be subject to atmospheric interference. Like, you wouldn't want to open those doors because you would have all kinds of you'd have all kinds of atmospheric interference coming in. I mean, you basically got to figure, if your shields are down, if you've turned your shields off to allow this ship to enter orbit basically under its own protection, what are you allowing through to actually hit the hull of the ship? And if you open a bay, be it a torpedo bay, be it a missile bay, be it a gun bay, what are you allowing to actually interfere with the hull of the ship?
I think of the Adama maneuver when they open up
Exactly.
the bays and all the fires coming in.
Exactly. So what kind of
The one
damage are
Raptor
you
pilot, one Viper
allowing?
pilot's like, "This is gonna get
Yeah.
interesting."
What kind of damage are you allowing into your ship to allow that maneuver to allow? And that would be your like worst case scenario. Like, you've overheated your high racks. You're basically, you're going to die. How much damage can we get out? How much shields can we get out? Kind of
Well,
thing.
I think the easiest thing for them to do is just make it so it instantly disables them if they try to use them. For size 12s, I think CIG, if they're even considering allowing javelins to go into Orison and other gas cloud giants like this,
and
um,
and that's kind of the
and
real
the big
question. Like,
turrets, I
what
think you
did
nailed
the
that.
yeah, the big turrets should be disabled. Like, you don't want to have to deploy your turrets to allow them to take all that drag, because as soon as you start to get into orbit or into low atmo, you have to deal with drag
Well,
and all kinds of shit like that.
we're holding an upper atmo. We're up with the storm walls, the
Well,
space whale
so
area. But yeah,
as
there is
soon as you
gravity.
talk about troposphere, even like the highest level of troposphere, you're still talking atmosphere, interference and shit like that. So you may not have the same level of drag as you would in like lower atmo, but you'd still have drag elements you'd have to consider.
I think that they should, just for game balance reasons, keep them disabled. Um, when it's sitting still. So when right now, if you're in Atmo in Orison, it's actually very mild. Once you get down towards the planet where like you're going to go to Augustunlo or you're just flying around that area, it's
Right,
there's
but
even like those floating freighters that are up above you, the
so
Titans.
now imagine a different story.
Sorry,
Like
the
imagine
Atlases.
if
The
you have
Atlases.
imagine if you have a player starbase or whatever they're calling the equivalent of that has to try and claim a player owned ground base or something like that. So you want to have the ability to use those platforms, but possibly turn down their accuracy, turn down their ability to aim and all kinds of shit like that. Make them vulnerable. Make it so that the ability to use this kind of shit
Mm-hmm.
on the ship is limited. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to sit here in orbit with perfect accuracy on my guns. I'm sitting here in atmosphere, and I'm every bit of air resistance and shit like that. I'm having to feel my gun crews are having to feel this resistance and the thickness of the atmosphere and stuff like that.
Well, I just
Make it something that they actually have to compensate for.
they may turn around and they may say, well, the coil is going to have different pressures. I have a sneaking feeling people are going to say that. The coil
Well,
is like
like
an area with like a combination of asteroids in this like pocket that has like a whole bunch of crazy things going on. But for game balance reasons, I think we need to
no,
keep
and
it simple.
I agree with you on that. But like, okay, I wish Keta was here because he could kind of explain like the I'm a gun crew working this particular gun on a ship kind of thing. But like
Yeah, the
I'm a gun
ballistics of it
crew,
all.
exactly, and you have to have accuracy and
All right, let me call this on this. But yeah, thanks for the free flow on this and see what I can put together. But